Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
You know, sometimes they don't need notes, and sometimes they desperately need creative financing and note strategies.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of where we've morphed, right? Over the years, I developed the note system for home investors. Nobody had ever done that back then. Yeah. At one time, home investor franchisees, 60% of every transaction they closed was a seller finance note. And then they ended up selling me that note.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I didn't realize home investors have been around that long. I mean, I've known them obviously for a long time, and, they're the guys that have the billboards that say we buy ugly houses. Right.
Yes.
But they, I didn't realize that they had been around since the early 90s. That's amazing. I've been around since the early 90s in the business. I got in the business in 92.
Gotcha.
And, in 2012, when you got involved with helping like Deanna and with all of them with notes, that was a time when everything was coming back, right? The market was starting to recover and things were starting to happen. And a lot of it was the REO inventory, like you said, fell off. And so the market got healthier in terms of what was offered out there. I didn't realize that they were selling notes instead of REOs. That's interesting, but that's cool. Yeah. That's where you can come in and teach people how to make money doing this, And a lot of people think that the note industry, and they think so mistakenly, but they think the note industry is just for the super wealthy. And that's really not the case. Everybody can be involved in this to whatever level they want to be involved in it.
One of the things that I think we've done the best at is show people how to build a legacy with them and their family with financial modeling. So I'm going to use my pen here as a visual aid, right?
Right.
So pretend that represents a stream of payments. Call that 20 years. Okay. And you buy there. Just say the payments were $1,000 a month. Okay. So there's 240 payments at $1,000 each.
Gotcha.
Right. And it's a timeline. That's call it $100,000 note with interest.
Okay.
Right. Now, what I do is I come in and buy notes at a discount. So I pay, say, $80,000 for that stream of payments. So I'm entitled to all of those 240 payments for an investment of $80,000.
Gotcha.
Okay. Let's just say that I did this in a Roth IRA account. Okay. So my Roth IRA account buys that cash flow for 240 months. I've taught this for many, many, many IRA administration companies.
Right.
Then I say, you know what? I'm going to sell the first half of that note. I'm going to sell this part.
Okay.
Now that's worth way more money than the payments that are due way out in the future.
Gotcha.
So I sell 10 years of that note for $79,000.
Okay.
Now I have $1,000 remaining investment, right?
Right.
I own those back 10 years of the note. That's financial modeling.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well,
if you sit down and do the return on investment for something like that, that's insane. Those numbers are off the charts.
So, Mike, I tell people all the time, I say, I've been asked what's the yield on that like a million times.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, I know how to calculate the yield.
Sure.
But I train all these engineers and, ninja math people and stuff. And I'm like, and so I'm in a class and I'll say, you know what the yield is on that? And they're like, no, tell me. And I'm like, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. A
I tell
large
people
number.
the best deal is when you don't need a calculator.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah, that's a unique technique that actually my father-in-law and his partner developed in the seller finance note business. It's called a partial.
Okay.
And it's very interesting. We did it for a lot of financial reasons in various markets. I bought a lot of, loans that the property had gone down in value, as I said. I bought 2,000 portfolios of land notes. So I bought a lot of land paper. I did a lot of things where you had to kind of do it a little differently to make it work.
Right.
And from that, and then I got really introduced into, 20 something years ago, the self-directed IRA world.
Yeah.
And so I started working with some of these companies and the guys that were considered the best out there at understanding the regulations of self-directed retirement accounts. And so
Right.
I ended up doing some co-teaching with some of those guys. And then one day we were kind of sitting around and I said, did you guys know that you can do this with a note? And they're like, their eyes are about to pop out of their head. And I said, so couldn't you do this in an IRA? And they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So since then, I've taught this to thousands of people and seen a lot of people really, I think, change their life with it. But it's an example of, when you say I teach people financial modeling, people are like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's a small example of what that means.
Well, but financial modeling means different things in different contexts, right? And this is one of those things where what you're doing is you're modeling best practices. So you're basically saying, look, this, and let's be honest, there are investors out there that will buy $120,000 worth of payments for $79,000 all day long. Right.
It's way better than a rent. It's way better than a rent property.
Absolutely. Right. And so it's the return on their investment is pretty significant for what it is that they're looking for. Right.
Yes, sir.
Then you start looking at the $1,000 that you have left, and you've got another $120,000 worth of payments that are due. I mean, that return is just off the charts. And the fact that you can do that type of thing and you teach people how to do that is, I think, absolutely invaluable. And I didn't realize when we came into this, I didn't realize we were going to have a conversation about something that would absolutely make my eyes want to pop out, because I'm literally holding them back in right now. But, that's kind of, I mean, when you start thinking about what's possible, and you start thinking about the different ways that you can make things work. I've heard about the note industry, but I've never really gotten into it. I've never educated myself on, and certainly never talked to anybody that's a master like you are of something like this. So let's talk about this for a second. Let's use a scenario. Let's say that, because one of the things that's happening right now with interest rates being higher and all that is, again, seller financing is back in the deal. And by the way, seller financing is back in the deal out here more than most people realize, because of something that's been happening, and this, in the last 20 years. Okay. So there are a number of people that I know personally very, very well that are very close to me that have a principal residence that has $1 million, $1.2 million in appreciation in it. And if they went out and sold it tomorrow, they only have a $500,000, for a married couple, they only have a $500,000 grace period. So, or grace amount. So their capital gains exemption is only that $500,000. They've got some of these people have $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 in capital gains sitting out there. And they don't necessarily want to turn around and make their house into a rental and do a 1031 and all that kind of thing. So talk about how, and I know you can't give tax advice, but talk about in a hypothetical, how somebody who's in a situation like that could sell their property with a seller carry note. how that affects their capital gains. They still have to pay the capital gains, right? But they pay it over time, correct?
You know, there is a way that maybe they don't even have to pay it
Okay.
ever.
Okay.
Depends on their tax situation, their
Yeah.
other income. So what you're describing is you're describing capital gains, which
Yeah.
is the difference between your basis and what you sell an asset for that you've owned
Correct.
for long-term investment purposes, right?
Correct.
I'm not an accountant or a lawyer, so as you said, not giving tax advice, but I paid for a lot of it, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Me too.
And so the IRS lets you take that gain and lay it down and pay it over time if you take your payments over time. It's called an installment sale, correct?
Right.
That's what you're referring to.
Right.
So what happens though, interestingly, is as you're incrementally taking that capital gain, you know, right now this year, depending on other income, you could get $95,000 capital gains before capital gains tax even starts. Now that's not in every person's situation, but a lot of people would actually qualify for that.
Okay.
So there's a possibility, literally, that you may not actually be taxed because you're falling under that threshold of $95,000 of capital gains in 1 year.
I got you. So if they structure this seller financing where they carry back, and let's just use a number, let's just throw it out there. Let's say it's 700,000, right? Because they've got $1.2 million in appreciation in equity. And after their basis and everything is calculated, they take their $500,000, they've got 700,000 left over. Let's say they carry that 700,000 back as seller financing, but they structure it to where they don't get 95, because the interest part of it is not part of the capital gains. It's the principal pay down. So if they structure it to where the principal pay down is less than 95,000 a year, there's a way tax wise, and they'd have to consult with their accountant, and you know, everybody's tax thing. This is not tax advice, but everybody's situation is different. But if they could do that, if they could structure it that way, they could potentially get out of that capital gain deal. And the reason why I bring it up is several years ago, I owned one of the largest real estate brokerages in North America. And I had a guy offer me a large amount of money for it, cash. He was an investor. And I went to my accountant and I said, listen, this offer just came to me. What can I expect to pay in taxes? He said 45% in capital gains, because I had started it brand new, right? From nothing, and I paid cash for everything. So after it was all said and done, I was going to pay almost half to the government. That kind of thing just doesn't work for me. And so one of the things that always sort of stuck with me was I started researching it. And one of the things I could have done was I could have done this as like a seller carry, right? And not too long ago, I attended a seminar that was really, really cool. It was a 2-day training. And they were talking about buying businesses from baby boomers, right? That were ready to retire. And they had a nice company that, nice business that was making money and doing its thing. And there is in fact an issue, especially out here in California, where your capital gains tax rate is enormous. And I'm sitting in this room with a bunch of these people that are learning about all this. And there seemed to be sort of this running idea in that crowd from the questions they were asking and the conversations they were having, privately, that I was a part of, that they didn't feel like that was something that a seller would do. I got news for you. They absolutely will, Eddie. And I would have, right? Had I known then what I know now is what I'm getting at, right? And I wish my accountant had said, well, you could do it this way. This is a way to potentially offset that, and you don't have to pay that much in taxes to make this thing work. That would have helped me a lot.
There are so many tax hacks that we've stumbled into. There's even more tax hacks where you can sell a stream of payments that are mostly interest,
right?
Which changes a partial, right? You now change, instead of paying ordinary income tax on the on the interest you've collected, if you sell that portion of the note, it's an asset sale.
Right.
Drastically changing how it's taxed. So it's just endless of 50,000 closed deals and people getting their accountant on the phone with me. I got an email this morning. We're buying a package of notes from a very sophisticated real estate investor that lives up in Indianapolis, and he carries seller financing. And I bought many notes from him. And I told him in their last round, I said, I really need to have a meeting with your accountants. And I need to kind of share with them what I've kind of figured out with some attorneys and specifically tax attorneys about this stuff. Because I think I want to make sure they know what I think I can point them to. They're the experts, but sure. I'm a specialist. And so I know things that we've learned that are not necessarily natural thinking. And so it's kind of endless of stuff we've figured out like that over the years. About buying notes and leveraging. And, people like today, virtually every person that goes down the road with us to some degree, it would be past this interview, but somebody that goes down the road with us to a certain degree, we show them some crazy compelling math of seller financing your rental. So John Burns first said this about, this time last year, that your mortgage payment on a starter home is $1,000 more than rent, right?
Right.
And so I said then, because I've seen John Burns many times, I said, well, it sounds like to me you'd want to be a lender. And so I started angling that and using that in some teaching. Then Bigger Pockets comes along in January, and they say they've ran 19 markets, and they're saying that your rent is excessively more than your mortgage payment. So we took that a step further and said, okay, don't use a Fannie Mae rate, because most people that are going to get a seller finance note are not Fannie Mae candidates. They're non-QM buyers. They're non-qualified mortgage buyers. So that's about 1/3 of all loan originations today. So we ran that model. We picked their numbers and we ran that model out. And we found out if you ran that model of people's principal and interest mortgage payment compared to their rent, it was 150% of their rent.
Wow.
In the cities that they picked. I didn't pick them.
Right.
I just used all the math that was pure to the formula. And then we know that if you have a rental, about 50% of your rent income goes to expenses.
Right.
So let's just use easy math, right? You rent for $1,800. I'm using Dallas, Texas as an example.
Fine.
You rent for $1,800. You net $900. But your mortgage payment is $2,400.
Right.
Okay, you're netting $900 renting. You're netting $2,400 carrying a seller finance note. Let me think. People say you don't get your appreciation. I'm saying I think you do.
Yeah.
And so we have a wave right now of people selling their rentals and owner financing it, just simply because we're showing a math that other people aren't quite painting the picture. We're not making up any numbers. We're just saying that's the market condition.
Well, and it's putting yourself in the best position that you can be in, right? It's because just like back in the 80s when we were having a savings and loan crisis and we had all these properties in foreclosure and all these things happening, you all pivoted and you figured out a way to solve it, to get through. Like you said, if you were gonna survive in a market like that, you were gonna have to be creative. You're doing the exact same thing today with this that you did back then. You're just the market is the market, right? All you're doing is you're adjusting to it and helping people take advantage of it.
Everybody knows that even the worst of markets, somebody's going to make a fortune.
Yeah.
We've seen it in every cycle. Right?
Absolutely.
First of all, in 1980, I can't take any credit for it. I just stumbled into the business.
Yeah.
Right. By 1986, I could be a little more strategic.
Sure.
By 2024, I can be really strategic. So there's a lot of stresses in the market. The rent property math isn't working near as well for all the obvious reasons. Rent went up by 20%. Expenses went up by 60%. So most people are collecting way less net rent than they were in 2019 on the same property, right? And we have a banking crisis that is in the midst, right? And that's what's caused a lot more note inventory to hit the market. Banks are either selling discounted notes or they're requiring their clients to sell discounted notes.
Yeah.
Because the banks, other than the top 25 banks are in excellent shape, right? But they only have 4% of their portfolio in commercial loans.
Right.
Other than the top 25 banks, call it the other 4,700 banks, 44% of all of their loans on the books are commercial loans. That's a problem, right?
Yeah, well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and every challenge, somebody has a solution, right? And the people who have the solution, it's just like, we talk about this all the time on this podcast. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter what it is that happens. If you look hard enough, you'll find a positive. Okay. Just like in this market, you look hard enough, you'll find an opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's something we teach all the time. We're constantly teaching it. Now, not in the note space, but in the space of, there are a lot of people right now after this NAR settlement that are getting out of the business wholesale. Like they're just out of here. Right. And it's because of a lot of unfounded fears. There are a lot of us that feel like that the NAR settlement is going to actually make us a better industry. And so there are ways to look at things. I'll give you an example. We could be here for 5 days talking about the RTC, but there was one in particular. I went to work for a mortgage company, a mortgage bank that was owned by the RTC, and some of the richest families in Mexico and their families you've heard the name of, got together, pooled their money, and they bought this full mortgage bank out of the RTC. Okay. Turned it into one of the top lenders in the nation and made an absolute killing doing it. Absolute killing. There were tons of opportunities with the RTC and with the bank crisis with the savings and loan crisis that happened that people took advantage of. The Hunt brothers really did well, right? Yeah. Because they bought lots, and I mean, there's lots of, and I mean lots, not lots in summary of a lot, but lots of assets, right? That were massively discounted in terms of their actual value of each one, but they bought them in $20-25 million bundles. And man, they did really, really well. So there are ways in any market, no matter what it is, to succeed. And I believe that what you're teaching people is absolutely invaluable. So if somebody is listening to this and they want to learn more about notes, they want to learn more about what you teach, and they absolutely need to, what can they do? How can they get a hold of you?
I think the best thing that we can do to give people a compression of time of what's possible in about 2 hours is that we have a master class. Okay. In about 2 hours, we do financial modeling. We show people about buying notes. We show people about creating notes. We show people about buying non-performing notes. All three are kind of the towers that are doable in this market today. And we give people a sense of how it works. And the other thing is we answer their questions. Yeah. We don't just blow through it and say, okay, you guys, goodbye. Yeah. We slow down and answer questions because, and a lot of times we learn a lot from other people's questions we didn't necessarily know to ask. Right. But we do it in that way. So here's the masterclass. It's noteschool.com/Litton. So I'm giving this class to your audience. I don't necessarily, we sell this class. Yeah. But I'm going to give this class to your audience. We do extremely well with your audience. I can assure you, we are very excited to present to your audience because they understand it. We do really well with realtors. I have a lot of connections in the realtor world where realtors, we're not their day-to-day business. We become their investing strategy. Yeah. right?
Yeah, and I can see it,
some
man.
people
I
are
mean,
looking for a business, and some people are looking for a business, investing strategy.
yeah,
We can help people with both.
yeah, yeah, and that's awesome, man. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to meet, and I'm so glad that you came on the program. I cannot thank you enough, Eddie, for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. It's been amazing meeting you, and I can't wait to take your master class. I'll be the first one signing up. We'll
Thank
put a
you very
link
much.
to it in your description for the episode too. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you.
Appreciate you, buddy. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.